Hey guys, today marks exactly 1 year since I entered hospital with the worst possible symptoms you could ever imagine. This was following a silent meditation retreat, and I came to the hospital feeling paranoid, feeling foggy. I couldn't stand upright, and it really was just the worst possible time I've ever experienced in my life. You can see from my doctor's report here that I had numerous different tests. I had a lumbar puncture, I had MRI scans. They thought maybe I had encephalitis. I was just experiencing the weirdest symptoms, the weirdest sensations, and I really didn't think that there was any way out. I thought I had fundamentally broken my brain, and there was nothing that they could do. And they essentially told me this as well. And this really was the low point, even when compared to my prior long COVID symptoms at the beginning and the onset of long COVID. This really was a real low point. And today, I'm going to share with you exactly what I have done to get back and what I would do if I were to go through this all again. And I just wanted to share a little bit of a message of hope as well, because now, a year on, you can see here that I am engaged to my lovely fiance. I'm back traveling again. So I was out in Sicily this summer, enjoying coffee, enjoying eating lots of nice foods, and just having a wonderful life. So I wanted to share this video as a message of hope, but also to share exactly what I would do if I were to go through this all over again, because I obviously have spent the last year, on top of the 4 years prior, trying to figure out exactly what I should be doing and testing all these different treatments, trying all these different therapies. And I have broken this down into kind of three parts that I would go through again to hopefully save you a little bit of time and pain that I went through as well. So, to kick things off, I think it is very important when recovering from conditions like long COVID, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, to do things in phases. And I learned this very much the hard way by going on this silent meditation retreat when I was in a very hyperactive and heightened state, and having these big kind of emotional releases. And that was devastating, to be honest, because it all came up at once and it was just the wrong way to go about it. So, I would start off with an initial phase of stabilizing and regulating my body and system. So, what I would not be doing, I would not be jumping straight into deep emotional processing work. So, EMDR, emotional release work. I would be doing things very gradually, because if you do this stuff straight away on a delicate system, this is not going to be helpful. This is not going to help you. You're not going to get the most out of it. And it might even be very harmful, which I found on this meditation retreat. I also wouldn't obsess over symptoms. So obviously you're sitting and dealing with a lot of unpleasant symptoms, whether it be brain fog, fatigue, all of these awful things. But I would not be obsessing over them and trying to figure out the root cause of every single thing that's going on in my body, as hard as that may be. I also wouldn't dive into super introspective work. So I would not dive straight into things like somatic tracking, things that are very kind of introspective, where you're paying a lot of attention internally. Now, this has been fundamental for my recovery later down the line, but I would not be starting with this kind of deeply introspective work when you're in a state of panic, overwhelm, and fear. So, what would I actually be doing in this first phase? So, first of all, I would be building out a crash toolkit. So, when you're experiencing these kind of symptoms that come with long COVID, chronic fatigue, you will be having a lot of crashes, a lot of flare ups. You will be having moments where you just cannot sit upright. You can't go out. You're maybe feeling incredibly paranoid, panicked. And you need to have a way of calming yourself down, regulating yourself. And that is why I built out a kind of crash toolkit. And a lot and a big part of my recovery has not been around kind of suppressing symptoms and trying to distract and avoid, which I think a lot of the kind of coping mechanisms and nervous system hacks do. But you do need to have the ability to regulate yourself, especially when you're in this massive state of overwhelm. And the only thing you can do is to do some kind of open eye meditation, some self massage, some gargling, some cold therapy to subdue your system, to reduce the kind of symptoms. And that is a very important ability to have. And it's not going to be the foundational element of healing, if, at least in my case, but it does allow you to know that when you're in those awful moments, you're able to bring yourself back. So, first of all, I would build out a crash toolkit. This would involve things like gargling, self massage, open eye meditation, things that will physiologically have an effect on your body and reduce the kind of overwhelm that you're experiencing. Then I would go on to lifestyle foundations. Now, you're all probably fairly familiar with this. You always hear about different diets, all these different things. And I've tried everything. I've tried numerous different diets. I've done low pral, which is a low acidic load diet. I've tried carnivore. I've tried vegan, paleo, all these different things. And for me, when it comes to lifestyle, I found that the kind of simple basic things have been helpful. Getting good sunlight in the morning, having good sleep hygiene, eating well, a roughly kind of paleo diet, maybe low histamine if that's something you're struggling with, having a cold shower helps to regulate my system, moving enough and so much that I can actually, experience some blood flow within your body, but obviously that needs to be worked within your kind of range. And it's a very personal kind of thing you will go through, and very, very gently graduate that all up. So the lifestyle foundations for me have been fairly simple, fairly good, basic hygiene, and that has been very helpful. Then I would move into the kind of somatic practices. So for me, the biggest changes that have driven physiological change for me has been somatic work. And there's a variety of different somatic work that I have done. So it's very much been kind of body based as opposed to some kind of cognitive sort of brain training type stuff. And Somatics has been something that's been incredibly useful. This is very body based. You gently move parts of your body and do this thing called pandiculation, which is a kind of reflex that animals use to help them to regulate. And this has been incredibly useful. Some gentle kind of emotional discharge techniques around kind of shaking. There's a technique called TRE, which is quite useful as well for doing this kind of physical work. Eye open somatic tracking. So I've talked about how at the beginning, when you're in this kind of heightened state of overwhelm, you don't want to be doing things that are super introspective. So closing your eyes and really diving deep into sensations is not going to be the best thing. So doing things like eyes open, somatic tracking can be helpful. Doing other regulation techniques, some gentle movement, even some kind of gentle bilateral stimulation, such as throwing a ball from side to side. That is, again, a very physical somatic practice that brings you out of your body, so out of your head into your body, and allows you to kind of tap into these regulation techniques. But in this phase, I would be keeping things very gentle, very kind of little by little, and not being kind of too introspective and overwhelming your system. So as I mentioned here, focusing on things that are eyes open versus lower kind of, which are lower introspection rather than the kind of very, very internal focused, physiological based regulation methods. So breath work, body related things. And also I would be looking for moments of clarity, not huge releases. I had a huge release on this silent meditation retreat where I was just crying, and then I sort of felt normal for a second, but this is just all too much and it caused a complete breakdown afterwards. So you want to be having little moments where you're like, oh, okay, I noticed something there. Maybe I feel a little bit more regulated. Oh, okay. Rather than these massive, massive shifts, which I think is very, very tempting to want to do. And very understandable, because you're like, I want this shit to go, right? But that is the way that I found better. Then in terms of medication support as well, like I'm very much someone who's not like opposed to medication. Like I see sometimes with certain brain training and nervous system stuff that, any talk of medication is just wrong. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think it's important to have a holistic and supportive approach. And for me, I have had some useful benefits from things like LDN. I know that some people have had experiences, positive experiences with POTS related medications. I know some of the girls in the group have experienced that. Some things around your cycle. If you're a female, then that's obviously going to be super useful and super important. And then also some simple supplementation as well. So things like magnesium glycinate, L-theanine has been useful for me. Things like niacin, gentle supplements that can be helpful for overall kind of functioning. So nothing crazy, but all of this stuff is obviously to be done with a specialist, and it's very, very very useful as a supportive mechanism whilst you're doing all of this other kind of emotional processing work. So then I would move on to a second phase. So this is now when we're feeling a little bit more stable. We have an ability to regulate ourselves, bring ourselves back to some kind of baseline, and we have an introduction to kind of somatic-based techniques. And this next part would be kind of the deeper emotional processing work, which has been absolutely fundamental to my recovery, and it has really been the thing that has driven me from where I was, where I could barely get up and I was just having paranoid thoughts, like dizziness, vibration in my eyes, to the point where I'm now just loving my life again. So what I would not be doing is diving straight in and doing this deep processing work, this EMDR, this very very deeper introspective somatic work without having done this groundwork first. That is so so important. It's why on the mend we do things in a very graduated way, because if you just jump in, not only will you not get the benefit from it, you may do yourself a lot of harm as well. Which is why when I speak to people and they're like, "Oh, maybe I tried EMDR and I did a few sessions, it didn't work, or it was a bit too intense." I'm like, yes, I'm not surprised, because if I did that at the beginning, I would have had a catastrophic experience. So very, very important to do things gradually. I also wouldn't chase huge releases. So this kind of work isn't about these kind of massive moments where you just dispel and have this massive release. Although they can happen, and I have experienced something similar in EMDR sessions and somatic sessions, that is not the aim. We're trying to process things gradually, little by little, and allowing it to be integrated within the rest of our system. And I also wouldn't constantly change protocol. I've spoken a lot about this before, but so often I see from people, they try 3 sessions of EMDR and they're like, that didn't work. So let's go on and try hyperbaric therapy now. Okay, let's do 4 sessions of that. Then let's move to another protocol. Oh, and then we do a new diet. And this is just fundamentally one of the worst things you can do for recovery and for your peace of mind. And I've experienced this a lot myself as well, because I would jump from one thing to the other and chase the kind of new trend. And all that this does is, not only is it incredibly expensive because you're spending money here, left, right, and center, but you're not actually bringing yourself any clarity and peace of mind, because you will do 3 sessions of EMDR. You'll be like, that doesn't work. And then a year later, you'll think, well, did I really give it a proper go? Maybe I'll give it a go again. And you never bring yourself any clarity. So you need to go through your protocol or your whatever you're trying, whatever it might be. Maybe it's not this, maybe it's hyperbaric therapy, but go through it, stick to it for a period of time, and then get to the end and be like, okay, even if it doesn't necessarily work, I can tick that off and be like, right, I gave that a good go. Let's go and try something else. So that's something that I would also mention. But the aim of this kind of release and rewire phase for me was all about physically processing and completing these uncompleted survival energy responses that have been stuck in our system for a number of years. And I've got another video. You can see that in my suggested on the main video, which explains a little bit more about the thesis around it, how it differs from brain training, because we're not trying to rewire kind of these responses. We're trying to physically integrate this stuck kind of survival energy that is repeatedly trying to complete within our body. So anyway, I would start with some deeper somatic work. So I would focus on things like bilateral stimulation. This can be done using websites like bilateral.io. That's a website that we use very often. It can be done using your hand. It can be done using tapping. All of these different techniques that help you to kind of gently bring these things up and gently process. I'd be doing things like somatic experience. Pendulation is a technique that's used within there, where you're able to oscillate between areas of discomfort. So maybe the brain fog, maybe the fatigue, maybe the aches, maybe the pains, and then a position of safety. So in your feet or wherever it might be. Full body somatic. So again, this is using this pandiculation technique in various areas all over your body. Somatic allowing, so just really sitting with sensations, allowing them to be there, and working with those feelings to try and allow things to surface and to physically process. Then I would be going on to EMDR once these kind of deeper frameworks have been put in place, because EMDR for me has just been fantastic. And the thing that has been really useful for me, and it took me a while to kind of figure this out, was first of all finding the right practitioner, because EMDR is a therapeutic technique that utilizes a kind of bilateral stimulation. So we have a light or a signal that goes back and forth as you're watching it. And as you're doing so, you're allowed to focus on certain memories or sensations. And this mechanism, which mimics REM, the rapid eye movement within sleep, allows you to physically process on a very physical level. So it's not just talking about things, but very physical in the way that you're processing. And it's very, very important to find the right practitioner, somebody who is familiar with chronic illness, chronic stress, things like MECFS, and also allows you to work with your body. So for me, I don't have any big T trauma, like nothing particularly massive necessarily happened to me. But for me, it was all about working with bodily sensations coupled with this these memories. So doing that allowed me to really physically process, and little by little, it was just been amazing. Yeah, it's been just a fundamental technique for my recovery. And then we look at integration. So whilst we're doing all of this kind of deeper somatic work, one of the important things I think to remember is we are not just trying to push, push, push all the time. It can be very tempting, and I know this feeling as someone who loves to push, loves to drive forward always. You want to be always doing things that are going to aid your recovery, right? And what is actually really important is you're having these moments in between your sessions. So in between the processing work, in between the somatics, the somatics, the EMDR, the bilateral stimulation, is having time and space to allow this kind of processing to take place. So we need to have periods of gentle expansion when we do EMDR, when we do somatics, and not these kind of big heroic sessions. So not trying to get these massive releases, but little kind of pushes in the right direction and then space in between. So this is why we have these intermittent periods of stillness, and it needs to be structured in a way so that we're doing this in a gradual and in an integrated way. And then again, we need to have this space to process, space to allow things to come up in between the sessions as well. That is really, really important, because you will notice things that come up when you're sleeping, when you're going about your day, but you can only do this in these periods of space and stillness. And then finally, I would be looking at this part 3, which would be strengthen and integrate. And this is more of a fun part, right? So we spent all of our time worrying about how do I get better? How do I recover? And now we're starting to look at things like returning to life, returning to career, returning to training, returning to just enjoying life in general. And what I would not be doing, however, is jumping straight back into training, to work, to whatever it is, with zero graduation. So this is something that you want to do very gradually. You don't want to just jump back in. And I say this with difficulty, because obviously I'm someone who is very much loves to just crack on and do things. And I know you probably will be the same. But doing things in a systematic and gentle way is very important, because we don't want the same thing to happen again. And we don't want to return to these old patterns, these old thinking patterns, these old constant patterns of rumination. We want to have developed a new outlook. We want to understand things a little bit differently. Like for me, prior to all of this, all I wanted was to get back to full-time sport, where I'd push myself till I feel sick every single day. And I realized that that was simply a coping mechanism, because I was unable to sit with sensations. I was unable to sit with feelings. And I don't want to go back to that. I still want to train. I want to go and do hard things, but I don't want to be back in a pattern where I have to do that every day just to feel okay. So that is a big learning that I've discovered as well. And we also don't want to constantly chase perfection, because perfection doesn't exist. And this is the biggest enemy of long COVID, especially if you experience a lot of kind of rumination and OCD type tendencies. Then perfectionism is the enemy of everything, and you're constantly worried if you ever get a little bit of brain fog that pops up, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Perfectionism really is the enemy. So we want to just be doing our best and leaving the rest. So what I would be focusing on is, first of all, a gentle return to movement. So again, a very gentle expansion, and we want to gradually be increasing our system's capacity and doing this in a very gentle way. And I find things like yoga is incredibly useful for this. I find that actually playing, so doing things more in a state of play rather than push. And when I say that, I mean, you might have seen my videos on Instagram, where when I was back home, I wasn't in the gym grinding out, trying to rep out 1 rep max, but I was in the garden. I was doing some shadow boxing. I was doing some kind of gymnastic work. I was playing around and just doing things that were, like a childlike kind of activity. And that is so soothing and so therapeutic, and has such a different effect on your body. And you're still moving, you're still exercising, but you're doing it in a much different way. And I find that incredibly useful. So that is a big kind of proponent that I'm a big proponent of that kind of approach to exercise, especially in a return. So we'll also be looking at doing mobility, flow like exercises. And then we integrate in towards sort of lighter strength, especially around the glutes, especially around the lower body, because that really helps POT symptoms. And then we kind of graduate more into sports, play, all of these kind of things. So again, we're focusing on graduation little by little to getting you back. Then I would look at re-entry into other activities. And I would be focusing on Creative practices, purposeful projects, and graded social exposure. So again, doing things gradually, but also taking this as an opportunity to reimagine what your life would want to look like. And I think this is so fundamental for healing. It might be dismissed as a bit of kind of woo woo, but for me, it has been so important. And creative practices like going and painting, like learning the piano, have been incredibly beneficial for me, stimulating my brain and changing how I think about things. And also the same with the work that I do as well. I've always been a hustler, grinding, pushing through, and now I do things that doesn't feel like work. It feels like play, and obviously I'm very blessed and very grateful to be in a position where I can do that. But working on a project like On the Mend, where I literally spend my whole life talking about my experiences with this and helping other people to recover, is just the most wonderful thing. And it doesn't feel like work. It's such a creative project. It's something I'm so purposeful, and I can't imagine ever going back. But I wouldn't have learned this without this kind of experience. And then also graded social exposure, so getting back into social situations, going and speaking, and being around people again, and overcoming these kind of fears around being exposed to people, both from a kind of virus point of view, but then also from a social point of view as well. And then having these guardrails in our life as well, because the reason very often that we end up in these kind of positions, and this is the case that I speak to so many people, they were pushing both ends, burning the candle. And having these guardrails of good sleep, good food, weekly regulation is incredibly important for us as we go forward. And then finally, the thing I would be looking at is the future. So whether it's getting back into career, going back traveling again, training, doing all of these wonderful things, because life will never taste so sweet. It sounds cliche and it sounds, a bit woo woo, but I I just cannot express how much I just fundamentally appreciate life now. I was out with my friends at brunch the other week, just a normal brunch on a Saturday, and I was sat there and they were enjoying themselves, obviously. But I was like, guys, you don't understand. Like, this is it. This is everything. This is everything that we want. Like, the sun that is shining. There's wind on our face. We are eating some, beautiful food, a coffee. This is everything. Like, there's not there. This is it. This is it, and it gives you such a rich, deep appreciation of life. And yeah, when I look back at my time on that hospital bed, staring up at those bright lights, feeling like the world was caving in on me and I was literally going to die, crying into my partner's arms. And I look now, and it's just the most remarkable thing. It's truly amazing. So yeah, I will leave it there. Hopefully that was useful for you guys. It gives you a little bit of an overview of exactly what I would do if I were to do this all again. If you'd like some support with all this and implementation, we put together a personalized plan for you on the Mend. So I'll leave a link to the description there if that's of interest. But I hope you guys are staying well. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope that you don't lose hope as well. So stick in there and stay healthy.